Hi, my name is Gene Feigelson. I'm a real estate broker in Houston, Texas. I'm a managing broker for two large Asian brokerages, which I've been embedded with for many, many years. I became a vegan in 1975. My family had been raising cattle for 3 generations, and we slaughtered a calf. One of the very last calf. I decided I wanted to get out of the cattle business, even though our family business was engineering and construction. We were given a lot of cattle, and I finally got rid of them. We slaughtered the last calf, and I was a single father with 2 young children, 6 and 7 years old. And one Sunday, right before the 4th of July, we're sitting down with my mother, where the children and I lived, and she was serving a roast. And my daughter looked up at me. Regina says, "Daddy, are we eating Francis?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She got up from the table and started crying. That day, my daughter Regina, who's now 52 years old, became vegan. And her son, my grandson, almost 16, has never had meat or milk in his life. So that's the point. I became vegan, a transition from vegetarian to vegan. I've been primarily vegetarian for the most part, since I was even a teenager. As a teenager, even in Vietnam and at the Navy, and I was primarily vegetarian. No meat, maybe occasional fish, but that day we became vegan.
Why would you have been vegetarian prior to that? What made you do that?
I grew my own vegetables. I had gardens both at my home in Beaumont and at our garden at the beach. We had beach houses down on Bolivar Peninsula near Galveston. And I had a huge garden down there where I had watermelons and cantaloupes and cucumbers, lots of cucumbers, okra, almost anything above ground, no potatoes, but a little bit of everything. And that was motivation. A lot of different kinds of tomatoes, from the tiny ones to the big tomatoes. Since I was an early teenager, I was massive amount of salads. Even though we had shrimp boats and fishing constantly, we were at the beach every weekend, and that was part of our life. I have salt water in my veins. I have so much exposure to the Gulf of Mexico, and that was just part of our lifestyle. But I loved the vegetarian mode. I studied it to an extent. I studied Confucius when I was 13 years old, and I know that a lot of the early Eastern philosophers were primarily vegan. And that was a motivation for me.
Now, for clarification, your daughter was getting ready to eat Francis, and you were a vegetarian then?
No, not primarily. My mother, we brought in this huge side of calf, whatever, that we gave to our employees and everything, but we brought some home. My mother was excited because we were cooking a calf that we had raised. We would go up every weekend to Coons, Texas, and Honey Island, Texas, to feed the calves. And my daughter loved that calf.
Prior to that, you were mostly vegetarian, but sometimes meat, it sounds like.
Almost no meat, very rarely, but mostly seafood. Okay. Mostly seafood, but very rarely meat. But my mother loved it.
And then your daughter had that moment, and you did that with her. That was enough to make you go vegan because of what she did?
But my daughter and my younger son, Alex, we all became vegan at that moment, and my daughter has maintained veganism since 1975. Wow.
And just her reaction is what made you do that?
Yes. It's an emotional impact on the whole family, even on my mother. We changed our diet that day.
Cut out dairy too?
Gradually. Yeah. I've always been an ice cream nut, but we gradually cut out dairy. The only dairy we do now in recent years is coconut milk or oat milk.
Yeah, the alternatives.
Yeah.
1975, your daughter gets up, table, that has a big impact on you. Was it an emotional experience?
Very emotional.
How so?
It was such an impact on the whole family, my son and my mother. My father had recently passed away, and so it was my mother with the 2 children and I. And it was just emotional on all of us to see her reaction. And she, very strong-willed young woman at 7 years old, very strong. And to this day, she's very strong-willed. She's a professor of nursing. She got her advanced degrees in nursing and has taught nursing in multiple languages. And just very, very motivated, and that was the stimulus for her.
How did you say, I don't even want to do dairy anymore?
It took me a while to understand that, the dairy was a product of a living animal, and where that dairy came from, I mean, it was cow breast milk that was designed for baby calves and not for human beings. And very quickly, I adapted to the fact that I don't need breast milk from a cow or a sheep or goat or anything else. Very quickly, I was able to adapt to that, and my children had no problems at all. Milk is not essential for our diet. There's so many other substitutes, and of course we drink a lot of water and virtually no colas type drinks, no carbonated beverages. A lot of juices, a lot of fruit juices, fresh fruit and bottled fruit juices, and of course tea.
Yeah. So you didn't really need a dairy alternative back then because they didn't really have all these options.
It didn't exist.
Yeah.
There was no dairy alternative. It didn't exist. We just went to fruit juices and milk. I had water and no milk. Yeah. No milk.
Anything else at that time that you could share with us that really brought it home that you want to do this and commit to it?
At that point in time, I had several friends who were already vegan. One of my librarians from the university, I was on the board at the university, a trustee at the university on the Alumni Association. And the head librarian and a couple of them had become vegan years before. One of the librarians told me about her visit to England, London, England, where there is a vegan library totally dedicated to veganism. I'd never heard of it, and she showed me some books on it and pictures of her visit and everything, and it just intrigued me. And she's a very healthy woman, older woman, and a very good friend, and that was just a motivation right there.
Wow.
I'm very connected to the university, Lamar University in Beaumont, and I have a lot of friends there, and a number of my professors had become vegetarian. Veganism wasn't the term we used for the most part. It was mostly vegetarianism. Veganism was an extreme terminology that in the 70s and early 80s it wasn't useful until much, much later. When I first moved to Houston with my two children as a single father, I joined the Houston Vegetarian Society very quickly, and a group of like-minded people, mostly college professors, attorneys, a few medical doctors were involved in it. We met in the Midtown Rice University area where most of them were originating, and that was the Vegetarian Society. And gradually the group of us merged into the Vegan Society over a number of years with leadership, and I've been kind of a leader in the background in the Vegan Society.
Now, that library you spoke of, did you say that was in London?
And she told me it was in London, somewhere in England. I believe it was in London. And she named famous British authors who were vegan. She was just so excited about it because she'd just come back from London. She'd been there several times. She was a librarian herself, and we had a very expansive library at Lamar University, primarily engineering, but that we able to expand the literary. One of my aunts was an author and created the Weinbaum library section, which able to add massive number of books, and I've donated a lot of books to the library as well.
So Houston back then didn't have a lot of vegans and vegetarians, except it was a growing thing, it sounds like, and you became a part of the society.
Early on.
And then you've been here all that time watching it grow, haven't you?
Since 1976 is when I moved to Houston.
And how old were you about then?
Back then, I was 33 years old, I guess.
Yeah, so that makes you what now?
79 and 8/10.
Nice.
Almost 80. I'll be 80 in March.
Does anybody make you try to prove that?
I have had a couple of people ask for my ID. They just say, "Are you old enough to drink?" We have a lot of fun. But I somehow don't have the wrinkles that a lot of my contemporaries have. I don't know I have no idea because I was exposed to the sun an awful lot. I probably have Agent Orange, I don't know. But I go to a dermatologist regular who's a very close friend who gets a big kick and shows me off to her staff. Here's what a vegan looks like, an elderly vegan. So we have a lot of fun.
And how have you seen this community grow here?
It has grown exponentially in recent years. Fascinating.
Mostly in recent.
Mostly in recent years, but 31 years ago, there was one vegan restaurant that I was aware of in Houston, a Vietnamese-oriented Asian-style vegan restaurant called Quan Yin on Bel Air at Wilcrest. And she has been there for 31 years. And the Houston Rockets basketball team used to have their practice headquarters right down the street on Wilcrest at the racket club, whatever. Coaches and some of the basketball players, these 7-foot-tall giants, would come into Quan Yin and they would see me in there. And this happened a number of times. And the head coach, who was actually one of my neighbors, would come over and talk to me. We would compare tofu recipes because tofu itself has no taste. How do you make it have taste? I says, it's all do with the sauces and you add vegetables and whatever. He's a coach that had heart trouble and other stuff, and so gradually he became a vegan himself, and he would come in frequently.
And that restaurant's still there today?
The restaurant is still there today. They're open 7 days a week. No, they're closed on Tuesdays, but they're open otherwise until about 9 o'clock at night, Quan Yin, and always a big crowd. They have a huge Thanksgiving dinner. Well-known reputation with the tofurkey or whatever. She specializes that, plus a lot of other stuff. But Quan Yin, Q-U-A-N-Y-I-N, I've been there a long time. It's one of our favorites. And the manager is Happy, Vietnamese lady in full Vietnamese costume, beautiful young lady.
That's her name, Happy?
Happy, that's what she wants to be called. I don't know what her real name is, but that is her name that we're required to refer to as Miss Happy. And we have a lot of fun, which is very special. What
are some other monumental things that have happened along the way?
Well, gradually there have been other vegetarian, vegan-style restaurants that have popped up. A Movable Feast is another one that came about that time. It started as an ice cream stand in Montrose, and gradually he added food on, but it was almost all vegetarian food. John and his wife, he's a lawyer, and his wife is a doctor of PhD, I believe, and I think later she became a lawyer. But they ran a restaurant called A Movable Feast, which still exists to this day up on Interstate 10. But they have a mixture of vegan foods and I think a few seafoods of some sorts. But the bulk of their menu, I'd say 80% is vegan. And they started in the late 1970s, early 80s, some sort around there, and they're still around, a new owner today. And they do a very good job, and we go there from time to time. That's been one of the second ones. And there have been a few others that have come and gone over the time that just had bad locations that didn't make it. Several of our Asian families had tried, and we tried to promote them, but their locations were not the best, and they couldn't afford to do the expensive promotion that it takes.
And we had an amazing lunch today. Tell us about that place.
This place is called The Hive Vegan Eatery. The Hive Vegan Eatery. And Robert and Lisa May put this together 2 days before Christmas this past year in 2021, and basically got full gear in January of 2022, and very, very successful. It's got a second floor that has just been added on for special parties, which we just had one last week, and we've had one last month. They have a mixed menu of all kinds of unique stuff, a lot of Cajun style vegan food. Their gumbo is wonderful. We had the etouffee today, which is a Cajun terminology, but all vegan. And Robert and Lisa May have just done a wonderful job, and as you saw, there was a big crowd there on Saturday afternoon, and I've been there on Wednesday evenings where there's a big crowd. And of course, the weekends, there's a mob scene in there. And I've been there actually when they were standing room waiting for tables. And they have tables on the inside, and now that the weather is cooled, outside. And fortunately, the outside tables face the east side, so the sun in the west is being blocked by the building, so the tables are great on the outside. And we have very cool evenings now in the early fall.
While we're talking about restaurants, we might be going to one tonight, right?
Cascabel Mexican Vegan Restaurant. Cascabel.
Yeah.
And we've asked for several different definitions. What does Cascabel mean? But they say Christmas bells. It's just the bells to bring you in to a healthy lifestyle. The food is wonderful, but it's a Mexican style or Hispanic style of vegan food, 100% vegan, a huge outdoor area on the east side of the building with a stage where they have karaoke type nights on Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, or when they have special parties there. We were there just last week, and just a huge crowd, huge crowd. They have interior dining, of course, during the day, and then the outside dining in the late afternoons, early evenings, whatever. But a wonderful, wonderful restaurant in what we call Spring Branch, right off of Long Point and North Gessner. Cascabel, great, great. They've been, today is their 3rd anniversary celebration. 3 years in business as Cascabel Mexican Vegan Restaurant.
It sounds like you're really supportive of all these.
I am very supportive. I support them on Facebook and promote them. Last week we went to a restaurant called Feigelson, which is a Persian style of vegan restaurant in Sugar Land, which got one of the best restaurant ratings by the city of Sugar Land, by one of the magazines or newspapers in Sugar Land, and a totally different menu than you are used to. Middle Eastern style, all vegan, and they are serious, serious vegan, called Feigelson, and there are quotes from Feigelson all over the place where he's talking about humanity of animals, where animals are important. Why would you slaughter an animal for food? The animal would slaughter you. I mean, the reasoning for Pythagoras, who, as everybody knows, is a famous mathematician from the Greek era, 2,500 years ago, and just beautiful translations of his sayings. But I say the owner is Persian from Iran, but he's been here a long time. He and his wife is Americanized, and they just have an incredible menu. People are shocked. I brought folks there in the past, and it's unreal.
What are some of the common things you hear people say when they find out you're vegan?
Many people say you can't live without meat. And I said, well, I guess I died in 1975 because I've had no meat since 1975. No meat since 1975. And they just kind of look at me and they look at my age. I don't know, I've aged a little bit. I've lost all my hair, or the bulk of it. 2/3 of it. Yeah, but that's hereditary. Every male in my family has lost their hair before they were 35 or 40. And my brother lost his hair at age 23, right after he came back from Vietnam. The culture of veganism is very unique, and I don't push it. I don't brag about it. I don't promote it up front, face to face. I just try to do it by example. I go to a lot of meetings with a lot of lawyers. The Bar Association has luncheons every month. My engineering groups have luncheons every month. And when we go to the hotel, I tell a maitre d' at the hotel or a waiter, says, can you prepare a vegan dish? They all say, no problem. Every hotel in Houston that we go to, where we have our banquets, like luncheons, dinners, whatever, no problem. And they bring out this huge plate that just looks so glamorous. They prepare it, and everybody has some ugly looking slab of meat or fish or whatever. And they say, I want what he has, because it looks so much better. And of course I get bulk in the veggies and whatever. And I have converted people, they tell me, to veganism by example.
Wow.
Like I say, I don't do speeches on it. I don't brag. I have a lot of friends that do heavy duty promotion, but I figure by example. And that's just, I'm laid back. I'm trained as a mediator. I've taught mediation and practiced mediation for the Houston Bar Association for many years, and I have to be subtle and just working people together, and that's just my training.
Yeah, and you've seen some pretty high level people take this on, right?
Very true. Our county judge is vegan. A number of our city council people and school board members, politicians are vegan. My Congressman Al Green has been vegan off and on at times. Very interesting story. My brother passed away from Agent Orange about 5 years ago, my younger brother. He was in Vietnam for almost 2 years and passed away, and he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Not every soldier gets that honor of Arlington National Cemetery, but ashes were interred with his father-in-law, who was a colonel in the U.S. Army. My brother was an officer in the Air Force. So after the funeral, Congressman Al Green, who I've known for over 30 years, invited us to go to dinner, the family to go to dinner with him that night. And he says, apologize, Gene, I hope you don't mind, but I'm vegan now, and we're going to a vegan Asian restaurant. And I said, Congressman, you and I have been to dinner many times together. Have you ever seen me eat anything but vegan food? He said, that's right, but the rest of the family may not. It was great. It was great. So this is Congressman Al Green from Southwest District in Texas, and just has been health-wise. He's a little bit younger than I am. He just turned 70, and has adopted the diet. Not necessarily by example of me, but he knows that's what's health. And my friends in the African-American community have moved in that direction drastically. We've seen a major jump, and I have converted. I have an interesting story to tell you. About 6-7 weeks ago, I had a real estate. I do mostly commercial real estate, but I do some residential. I was representing one of my Vietnamese clients selling a property in the Agleaf area, and I get an offer from a guy, and he wants to bring in the contract is not exactly to the perfection. I've taught contract law since 1989, so I wanted to show him how to do it. I said, come on up to the office and we will go over the contract and I'll show you the corrections. So he comes up there, and this is a man with a Nigerian name and whatever, but older gentleman in his mid to late 60s, retired from, I think he had been an architect before, but he was working in a real estate firm. And he comes in and said, my broker told me that he was your student years ago and that you're a mean 80-year-old vegan. And I said, well, I'll let you decide that. So we sat down and we just got along so great. And he looked at me and I said, I can't believe you're 80 years old. And, yeah, no problem. I just eat right. Well, what do you eat? And I explained my diet to him. And we worked out the contract. And there is an Asian grocery store right at the end of our shopping center called the GW Market, Great Wall Supermarket. And he said, can you show me what you eat? Can you take me down there? So we got out of my office, a quarter of a block down, just right down at the end of the center. And I pointed out some of the fruits that we eat and the vegetables in the Asian community. Now, this is not a vegan grocery store. It's an Asian that covers everything. I mean, they've got a big slaughterhouse, fish and pork and a little bit of everything, but they had a huge vegetable and fruit section. So I showed him some of the stuff, and he loaded his basket with all kinds of stuff. And I gave him a book that we give out to our new vegan friends called Veganism for African Americans, which is an educational that my doctors and other stuff, we promote that in the community. And he took all this stuff home, and he called me about 2 weeks later, and he said, my wife told me that you, Gene, saved my life. Because he had high blood pressure, he had other issues and whatever, and he went to this diet, very strict on a vegetarian type diet. Not vegan, but vegetarian, whatever, because he was in transition and still in transition. But he said, I read that book and I changed my lifestyle completely. The whole family, he and his grown children as well, are being educated in that. And he says, my wife said you changed my life. You saved my life, is what his words were. And I was just fascinated by that. Well, I appreciate the thought, but you saved your own life by adapting. You did it yourself. I just showed you my example. And you have to decide for yourself what you want to do. And to this day, he told me he's still moving in that direction. He's very, very comfortable with it. And his blood pressure has gone down. He went to the doctor, and it works. It works.
Wow. So how many chronic diseases do you have?
Can you spell zero?
It was a trick question.
None that I'm aware of. I did have prostate cancer 13 years ago, but it was hereditary. My grandfather, my uncle, two of my uncles had it, and I had it and got rid of it, and it's gone. But I'd been doing saw palmetto, which is supposedly the antidote for the prostate, but it really delayed it quite a bit because 13 years apart when it first appeared, and then it disappeared. And then it came back strong after I hit 66, and we got rid of the prostate, and I've had no problem since then. That's it. That is it. Nothing else. I've been exposed to COVID and all kinds of the pulmonary type diseases. Entire office has had COVID. There's so many people, my friends. I've taught some classes where 60% of the class came down with it later, and they said, you need to go get tested. I got tested. No COVID. no COVID. And my doctors say that the British Medical Society sent out a report that vegan people are the least likely group.
73% less.
Is that, well, you know the number, 73%. I thought it was 85 or something, but it's still a very high number, are least likely to get COVID.
How often do you get sick?
Well, 13 years ago I had prostate cancer, if you call that sick, but I really wasn't sick. I just got it removed, and I was teaching 10 days later on my feet.
No colds and flus? Nothing.
Never. I get all my shots. I've had my flu shots. I've had the COVID vaccine and the booster shot, whatever. And that was over a year ago, January a year ago. But I never get sick. Never get sick.
What about like, how many medications are you on?
Well, I'm very heavy on vitamin C and B12 and zinc. All vegan. I go to Whole Foods, Central Market, and I try to get the vegan vitamins, and that's all I do.
And do you do that just because you want to, or did somebody tell you how to?
Because I researched it, and I say, you know, avoid colds, you take zinc and vitamin C and B complex. And on my own, I just motivated, and sometimes I'll change it out. There's one of the other ones I can't even remember the name of.
What does your doctor think about all this?
She's amazed. My last physical exam, she just gave me a full physical, just shakes her head, and she says, "Gene, you have a body of a teenager." Thank you. I don't want to get in trouble. I sound like I'm violating the law, but she's just amazed. I mean, her father's younger than me. He's 72 and is retired, ill, whatever, but doctors have a hard life, and I kind of take it easy. But her father was a medical school professor and everything, and but she just can't believe that at nearly 80, I'm just as active as I am, working full time, doing volunteering. I work with the Boy Scouts. I teach for the Boy Scouts, and I organize different programs. I'm one of the first merit badge counselors for citizenship in the Society Merit Badge, which is teaching diversity and all the different concepts of how to get along with people. But it's a natural for me.
So it sounds like you might have some good tips on how vegans can more effectively advocate.
I think volunteering in the community give back to the community. We have a saying in Judaism called tikkun olam, which means to heal the problems of the world. To heal the problems of the world. And this has been a philosophy of mine, to give back, to volunteer. I don't make a lot of money, but I give back. I work as a volunteer for good politicians, and with the Boy Scouts, and with the Cancer Society, CanCare. I was a consultant for prostate cancer, and I have people all over the country, young men, not young men, but middle-aged men who come down with prostate cancer. Just the word cancer alone is bad enough, and prostate really affects them mentally, sexually, and whatever. And I say, 13 years ago, and I'm still hanging in there doing stuff and just take care of it. I just lost one of my good friends like 3 weeks ago to prostate cancer, but he didn't discover it till it was stage 4. But he didn't go to the doctor very regular, but I always have. I was married to a doctor for 15 years, and she was a cancer doctor specialist in research, but she died of cancer in March, and she was vegan. But she was older than I am, but still, she died of cancer.
I recently published a video of an oncologist who's vegan, and it brought up a lot of questions about, people are kind of like, vegan isn't going to protect you from cancer. But I think people just don't understand that there's different kinds of cancers. Some it's more protective against, and some are just out of our control. Can you speak a little bit on that?
Yeah, like I say, my prostate cancer, my doctor says it was hereditary. And I've got 3 sons, and they are alert to that as well. And they know to watch themselves and to get tested when they get a little older. And started being tested when I was about 45 years old, and it was clear until I was close to 60. Yeah, we need to watch it. There's all kinds of cancer. All kinds of cancer. And my brother, like I say, he had Agent Orange, which is a cancer of the skin. And there was nothing to prevent that. That was not hereditary. It was exposure to the elements in Vietnam. And over the years, many years, he had a lot of difficulties.
Now, would you say that eating plants is more protective against some cancers, and eating animals maybe could be a risk factor against some cancers?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. I mean, look who the largest land animals in the world are. The elephants and giraffes. They're strictly vegetarian. They're strictly, and look how large they're. Very healthy. Elephants live to be a very long life, giraffes as well. And some of the bears, I can't say, I'm sure they're carnivorous to an extent, a lot of fish, whatever, but I'd say a plant life, dedicated plant life is very conducive to good health. While the hormones and the additives they put in meat is scary. It's scary. One doctor told me over 60 different poisons are in meat. 60 different poisons are in meat that can stimulate the bad cells. We've got all the bad cells in us. It's just, do you stimulate them and to cause cancer? Otherwise, if you have a healthy diet, you don't stimulate and they just go their own way and disappear.
Now, do you think eating plants has been the thing that's helped you stay this healthy and look so young and all that, or could it just be your genetics?
Both my parents died at age 72. My grandfather died at 68. One grandfather died at 64. Grandmother died in the mid to late 70s. It's just on that side, both sides of my father and mother, they died earlier. I've outlived my whole grandparents and parents. None of them have. But I do have an aunt who lived to be 101, and another distant cousin on my mother's side who lived to be 105, who just passed away in January.
So maybe you got their genes.
Could well be. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be on Monday morning, what's going to come down, but I feel very healthy. I just never get sick. My doctor is just amazed. I never get sick. I got some sore muscles in my knees and then my back to an extent, but that's totally different.
Do you think it's important for other people to be vegan?
I think they have to do what's comfortable for them. I can't tell somebody how to live their life. I try to lead by example to my children and to my friends, but they have to do what they need to do. I cannot tell somebody. It would be nice if we quit killing animals, these huge farms with chickens and turkeys and cattle and pigs and whatever. I've visited them in the past. I used to have a lot of cattle. I know what it's like. And just think if we were locked up like that, just waiting for the slaughter. They don't know what's going to happen. Of course, they don't have the brain or the thought processes, but I think about that animal right before it's being slaughtered. And it's just, it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible feeling. So humanity is definitely a factor.
When you say they don't have the brain, you mean to anticipate?
No, definitely not. All they know, the sentient animals, they know what is happening to them at that point in time. They can't look into the future. We do look into the future to an extent because we know our history.
Have you seen animals that have been released from those situations?
Certainly.
And their reaction?
We have farms in the Houston area that are rescue farms. There's a huge pig rescue farm that the restaurant I talked about, Feigelson, they donate part of their proceeds to this pig rescue farm. It's just one of their pride where they buy baby piglets that are going to be slaughtered or whatever and take them out to the farm. And they're happy. I have a friend who had a Utopia ranch out in Medina, Texas, Kinky Friedman. He was a folk singer from time to time. He and I are the same age. We went to University of Texas together. And he had for many years Utopia Farm where people would bring animals, rescue animals, every kind of animal. He had some huge Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs that were cute little babies, and they're very smart. Pigs that you don't know are like dogs. They're very, very smart animals. And they could train them and whatever, but they grow big and big and big. And he had a bunch of them out at his ranch for many years.
So the reason why I was asking that is because, maybe you've seen videos where they release a cow or a pig, and it just goes, it's just, you could see all the joy and excitement. They just start jumping around and they're free finally.
I have seen that with the cattle, especially. Yeah. I have seen that with cattle. Being released, being pinned up is so unnerving for them. Mm-hmm. And that's an emotional impact on them to be, I'm free, I'm free. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful to see that, and I've seen that. And there are several ranch areas here that do have rescue cattle as well as pigs and chickens and turkeys. I think there's one that specializes in chickens near here. Houston has a lot in the west and northwest area of animals like that.
I'm pretty surprised by all the vegan activity here. Do you ever get any backlash?
I wouldn't think so. I think we're accepting of a lot of changes. Texas has changed in the last 30, 40, 50 years. You can go to San Antonio and there's a restaurant chain called Green. It's well known. They even have an Asian restaurant, which is very similar, but it's owned by the same people. In the Big Pearl Brewery grounds where there's a massive number of restaurants, they've got a fantastic restaurant, which is pet friendly, on the outside, pet friendly, and been there many times. But they have about 3 locations now. They had a location in Houston that was in the wrong area of town, but didn't make it. But San Antonio has a number of vegan restaurants. You go to Austin, there's a fabulous number of vegan, a lot of new ones that I've just heard about that I haven't even been to. Dallas has a number. The Loving Hut has several locations there, which is an Asian-themed restaurant. Addison, Texas, north of Dallas, has a beautiful restaurant, huge restaurant. Fort Worth now, that's a cow town. That is a serious cow town in Fort Worth. They've got one of the biggest and one of the best vegan restaurants in Texas in Fort Worth. But they have, I think, a location in Dallas and in Fort Worth, where it was just in Fort Worth. And it was recommended. I went there and I was amazed.
Now, could you be with somebody who's not vegan?
I do it all the time. My lifestyle. Like I say, I am embedded in the Asian community. And my Asian girlfriends, my Asian partners in the office, and they eat meat for the most part, but they respect me. When we have banquets or dinners or whatever, they always make sure there's a vegan dish for me, which looks better than what they're eating, whatever. But we go out to dinner from time to time to different places, and it says I can go any place because I can always get a vegan meal. I have no problems, but it's very common.
Cool. You got any regrets?
I have no regrets. I miss the seafood. I was raised out on Bolivar Peninsula, which is across the ferry landing from Galveston. I have a very close friend who has a large seafood restaurant, and I haven't been there in years. We had shrimp boats. I used to jump out of the boat when we were in the bay and dig up oysters. My dad used to tell people that Gene was eating raw oysters at 18 months old. I didn't quite remember that, but maybe they chopped them up, I don't know. But raw oysters are a big thing in the Gulf Coast area. I guess it is all over the world. I think we've had it in Southeast Asia as well. But I miss seafood. I love to fish. I love to pull in the shrimp seine nets, but now I realize those are animals that need to survive as well. And the little animals are food for the big animals. So they have their own cycle that they have to do, but we don't need to hurt it, because right now what I'm understanding that there is a lack of seafood in the oceans. There's been overfishing, especially in the Pacific, a massive amount of overfishing. So there's a shortage. And as we mentioned earlier, there's these huge plastic islands that have affected the oceans. Massive islands of plastic that have got together and formed floating islands that really are affecting our whole cycle of life.
So between putting waste in there and whatever toxins and these anaerobic lagoons from these concentrated animal feeding operations and us dragging fish out of there, I mean, that's enough to...
It definitely affects our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And a long-range effect on our grandchildren. That's what the problem is.
Yeah.
The grandchildren are going to hate what we did to them because it affected the air, the water. There's a shortage of water right now, fresh water, plenty of salt water, but the fresh water is going to have to be recycled somehow.
You think we'll ever see a vegan world?
Not in my lifetime or my children's lifetime. I go to the grocery stores and I see people lined up at the butcher counter, they're just so geared to it. And I see stacks of steaks in the grocery baskets, and I just walk by and shake my head. Not in my basket.
How do you stay positive in a world like that?
I know I'm doing my part.
Did it ever get you down?
Probably should, but I know that there's a better life for all of us eventually. But yeah, it can get me down, but I can't stop the grocery store from selling meat. I do have an acquaintance from many years ago who inherited a fairly large wholesale butcher shop who became vegan. He became vegan. Unfortunately, he died in an automobile accident, but his sons are semi-vegetarian, not quite, but semi, but they got rid of the wholesale butcher shop from many, many years ago.
What are some of your favorite things you like to eat?
Well, almost every morning it's fruit. I do the melons, all the different melons. I used to raise watermelon and cantaloupe, and honeydew melon. The various Asian fruits and South American fruits that are available. Everything is available here. I mean, we have fruits from Chile and Peru, a massive amount. Grapes, pomegranate, love pomegranate, which comes from the Middle East primarily. They're pomegranate juices that are phenomenal. But that is my mornings. In the afternoons and evenings when I fix my own meals, I have various tofu and jackfruit. I mentioned jackfruit earlier to you. Jackfruit is a huge thing, larger than a watermelon. It's big. It comes from Southeast Asia, and it's sliced up and could be eaten fresh, cold. But what many of the vegan restaurants here have adapted is a jackfruit meat, where they can make meatballs. It looks like meatballs, but it's jackfruit. Barbecue, the long things on the stick, whatever.
Shish kebab.
Shish kebab, jackfruit shish kebab. The cascabel we talk about has several jackfruit. Earlier, the restaurant that we were at, the Hive, has jackfruit. Almost all of them now have moved in that direction because it looks like meat. You can buy small portions of the jackfruit. You don't have to buy the huge melon, and slice it up and cook it or do whatever you want with it. It's phenomenal. But that is one of our new favorites. It's been around for many years, of course, a couple of thousand years. The Asians have always enjoyed it, but we're just learning some of this stuff that's a positive.
You ever heard of somebody using banana blossoms?
Yes. Banana blossoms, and of course the raw banana itself, frozen banana mush, and just there's so many things. I mean, it's unbelievable.
So what other stuff do you eat besides fruit from all over the world?
At the Buddhist temple that I go to from time to time, where they have a huge vegan kitchen, and the monks all certify that all of the folks who work in the kitchen, men and women, are vegan. They prepare something called bitter melon, which is unbelievable. Now, if you eat bitter melon straight, they cook it one time, it's going to be bitter. But the way they cook it is they boil it and then cool it and boil it again, maybe 2 or 3 times, then boil it. And it looks like a large...
Gourd?
It's not as big as a gourd, it's narrow. But they will slice it and stuff it with different vegetables and tofu, and the sauces make the difference. A massive number of sauces, but it's a bitter melon dish, and only place I've ever been able to get it is at the Buddhist temple in Sugar Land, and it's the most phenomenal thing. I bring it to different parties and whatever, and people cannot, what is this? Where'd you get this? How'd you make it? So I wish I could make it. I've tried, but I can't do it the way they do it. It's bitter melon, but it's not bitter. It's not bitter because it blends in and they have so many different things, but it's a special way they make it, and these gals know how to do it correctly. It's wonderful.
Now, we've talked about going out to eat a lot. I know you probably eat fruit at your home. Yeah. What do you cook any kind of beans or grains?
Always. Charro beans and red beans, black beans. I love all my beans. And to me, beans have the concentrated protein that they say I'm not getting from eating meat. I eat a lot of different beans that I'll mix with my stuff and cook it for 30, 40 minutes, and may have a big pot that I'll eat all week long, and I'll just mix it with my other stuff. But I have lots of fresh vegetables, frozen vegetables. I love celery and cucumbers. I was raised, carrots, of course, are common American vegetables. Eggplant. I love the Eastern eggplant more than the European or African eggplant, it is different. It's a different flavor, different taste. But the Japanese eggplant, which is long, skinny, it looks like eggplant, purple, but has a different taste, different flavor. Different flavor. Sweet potatoes, of course. I've always been raised on sweet potatoes. Okra, the African dish. Okra came from Africa, like so many of our vegetables many years ago. That's what the bitter melon looks like, is a giant okra. The okra may be 6 or 8 inches long, or the bitter melon may be a foot long. Looks the same thing except giant.
Now, some people might give you a hard time for eating food that's from so far away.
You go to the grocery store and they may have brought it from Chile or from, not too much food comes from China, because almost all the Asian dishes, the Asian vegetables are grown in Texas and in California. Southern California has huge farms with every Asian food that I'm talking about is grown right here in the United States. Because the climate is very similar to China and Vietnam, and it can be grown here. They don't have to bring the fruit and vegetables from Southeast Asia. No problem.
You have any quotes you want to share?
I love so much of Buddhism when it talks about caring for animals, and Thich Nhat Hanh, which is a modern day Vietnamese Buddhist monk. Thich Nhat Hanh has published over 100 books and was a very, very strong advocate for veganism. And I wish I could quote some of the stuff he says, but some stuff is fairly long. But if you were to look up Thich Nhat Hanh, his books are only about a half an inch thick and over 100 books. I've got a bunch of them at home, and I love to read him. But I don't have any quotes just right off the top of my head. Almost 80 years old, I can't remember my name sometimes.
Well, don't confuse people. They'll think you're getting neurodegenerative Alzheimer's or something.
Not yet. I still have to go to court frequently. Yeah. I go to court frequently, and I have to testify and talk about the issues involving real estate and contract law and that kind of stuff. So I still keep sharp on that.
Do you have any tips on helping others take on this lifestyle? And while you're at it, maybe some resources you want to share.
The resources would definitely be to visit various vegan restaurants and the sections of the grocery stores. Almost all of our grocery stores in Houston, the Kroger, Randall's, of course Whole Foods, Costco, Sam's, they all have vegan products now. People are asking for them. They all are carrying them, the grocery stores. A lot of it is frozen stuff that is prepared in advance. Some of it can be prepared by you, but the availability is phenomenal, which we didn't have 20, 30 years ago. I just encourage people that if this is what you want, go for it. Tofu is not the only dish. Tofu is not the only, people think, how can you eat just tofu? I don't eat just tofu. And some of my friends are allergic to tofu. It's bean curd. Some people cannot eat it. So many substitutes.
You mean your vegan friends?
Some of my vegan friends cannot eat tofu, and there are so many other things that they can eat. They don't have to do it. I can handle tofu. It doesn't bother me.
Do you ever feel like you need to tiptoe around using the word vegan?
I had a client that I did a wonderful job for in real estate. It sold a very, very difficult property. Had a lot of challenges to it, but I was very successful in marketing it and moving it, and he made money. He was a college professor, and we became very, very good friends. He was a professor at Texas Southern University, and we handled the property several years ago, and he came by my office one day and said, "Gene, I have a gift for you." And it was a certificate for some steaks. I said, "Professor, I really appreciate what your thought and everything, but I have been vegan for many, many years, and I cannot accept your gift, and I would feel very uncomfortable even giving it to somebody. But if you are comfortable with it, you use it for yourself, but your friendship is all I need." But I thank him for it. That's one of the incidents. I have so many stories or whatever. That's just one that just suddenly came to mind when you asked the question. And I have no problems telling people I'm vegan. I have no problems telling them. And they just kind of look at me and whatever. How can you eat without meat? I've been surviving this long.
You had a lot of stories. Is there any other ones you want to share real quick?
I brought a group of several times vegan sushi from one of my favorite Asian restaurants here called Chef Kenny. Chef Kenny has two very large restaurants in Las Vegas, very, very famous vegan restaurants. He was, I think, born in Guangzhou, but raised in Singapore and learned vegan cooking in Singapore. He came to Las Vegas and opened up a fabulous restaurant. It was very successful. He just opened one up 3 years ago in Houston. I was one of his very first customers. I brought the Vegan Society to his restaurant on opening night. We had a phenomenal success. But they make a vegan sushi, a number of different varieties, different colors, just whatever. And I will go pick up a couple of dozen of the little pieces, which is basically 2 rolls, 24 pieces, I believe, is what it is. And I will bring them to a party. Especially, I brought one recently to a group of judges, and they were amazed. Look, sushi, sushi. And they told them, it's vegan sushi that Gene brought. And they wanted to know, where'd you get it? Where'd you get it? It was wonderful. That just very happened recently. And then recently I brought a vegan sushi to our county judge who has been vegan for many years. And she served it to some of her security people, and they were amazed that it was vegan. And all this came from Chef Kenny. Chef Kenny's been very, very successful. He's got a phenomenal restaurant here at Wilcrest, just in our Chinatown area. It's just... everything in his restaurant is wonderful.
And while we're on the topic of stories, do you have any success stories, whether you're a part of it or not, that you would like to share?
Well, the one I mentioned about my friend from Nigeria who said I saved his life. I didn't save his life. I just introduced him a different way of eating. One of my district judges lost 70 pounds. He says he went primarily to a vegan diet. Vegetarian, he didn't say vegan, vegetarian diet. Primarily introduced his wife and his kids to it. One of his kids is one of our Eagle Scouts, but he's a district judge, and he lost 70 pounds, and I didn't even recognize him. Did not even recognize him, because I'm used to 280, 290 pounds, almost 300 pounds, and here he is at 220. Unbelievable. I have a lot of instances like that of people that have said, I'm following your lifestyle, and it works. It works.
Anything like on the horizon that you're excited about that's up and coming in the near future?
In the last 6 months, we have been counting the number of vegan-oriented restaurants that have been opening up. Some very small, some off of food trucks, but primarily retail-type establishments. We have recorded 32 vegan restaurants, and from Clear Lake area near NASA to the Woodlands. Sugarland to Katy to Northeast Houston, 32. The concentration is in the inner city and in the energy corridor where we are now, here in north of Chinatown. But there's 32 and maybe more. We hear of more opening up. We have some people looking right now. I have some contacts from some folks in New York who want to open another restaurant here, a Thai-themed restaurant, which they will emphasize vegan food as well because they know it's hot and it's popular. It is in demand.
Now, you're in real estate. If somebody wants to look you up and maybe hire you, is that an option? And how can they do that?
Certainly. That's how people find me. Just Google my name, Gene Feigelson, or Vegan Realtor or whatever. And
you have a website or something?
Our company does. I don't promote myself that much because I do a lot of legal stuff. I work for a lot of the courts, but I'm a consultant for a number of groups who are looking for restaurant space. Or
so it's mostly commercial, not residential?
We do everything, commercial, residential, industrial. I started in real estate doing industrial in the Ship Channel area with cranes served and rail served warehouses, which I used to design and build many years ago when I was in Beaumont.
Because you have a background in engineering, right?
Background in engineering and design. That's true.
Yeah. So your assistants take care of the social media, I guess, and
they do. Stuff. I have a beautiful staff of Chinese and Vietnamese young women who work circles around me when it comes to computers.
So somebody
I'm everybody's father and grandfather.
Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to throw out there?
I love the fact that we are promoting veganism in the African American community. this has been very dear to my heart. I have so many good friends in the community who have heart disease, have high blood pressure, who have diabetes. It's been prevalent for many, many years due to their diet and lack of positive food, the food deserts where so many of my friends were raised and everything. So the African American community has adapted very, very quickly when they realized if we want to be healthy, we have to eat right. It's not mental, it's what you eat, what you eat. And the doctors will tell you, we have many doctors in the community as well who are promoting veganism in the African American community. Very, very important. The Hispanic community has adapted very quickly to it and understands that we need to eat right. Eat right. And of course, the Asian community, they cover all the bases.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the food deserts. Any ideas on how we can resolve that? Or?
We are working with our mayor, Sylvester Turner, to create opportunities for the restaurant chains, and HEB here, who is huge locally, has been opening different really fine grocery stores in those areas that have been neglected for so long. They've got a huge one right in the flood zone, right off of Highway 288. It looks like a beach house because it's way up high above the water, where it does get 6-8 feet when it floods. So it's an HEB, it's phenomenal. There's up in the north end an HEB. At the far east end, there's new HEBs. But they are moving into the areas, and their management and ownership, the Butt family, is just very, very strong advocates for opening up and giving people what they need, the proper food.
HEB.
HEB, Henry E. Butt. It's been around for 90 years in Houston. Started in Kerrville or Corpus Christi, I think Kerrville, many years ago. They're headquartered in San Antonio, but they have a lot of grocery stores in Houston. Central Market here and in Austin are their upscale products similar to Whole Foods. It's called Central Market. They carry everything. They carry meat and fish, but they emphasize a lot of vegan products, a massive amount of vegan products.
Well, it sounds like you've been a big part of this community for a very long time, and I'm sure a lot of people are grateful for you just being who you are.
Well, I appreciate the comments, but I just feel I want to make my contribution. I feel I have an obligation to give back. It's part of my religious culture to give back to those that have given to us. And I feel it's just very, very critical to give for our grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren's sake, to create a better world for our children.